I want to talk about pseudo-activists that exist and the preposterous lack of knowledge, lack of common sense, and the overall political climate, that exists today. And the best way to do that is to start from the beginning, the creation of the United States, and then we can move on from there. So a country's goal of existence is arguably to provide wealth, safety to citizens, and opportunities for growth of all parties involved. Now, whether these goals are accomplished is objective to each individual's views of life and prosperity. When looking at a country's creations, whether it's from a natural creation or through the need to escape the ruling of imperial governments, the United States went to war for independence through the desire to escape oppression. The values that were once widely longed for, such as less taxes and less regulations, were the reasons for the creation of a great country. The irony in the fact that a new generation is arguing against these previously normal views is significant. A generation arguing for the policies that accounted for the colony's road to independence. It begs a question of the disappearance of nationalism. Why is it a common thing to hate your own country? Why is it common to strive to be similar to a different country, one perhaps with a completely different economical, social, and political structure than your own, one with varying different populations, wealth concentrations, and so on? If you thought of country when these things were said, the country you may have thought of probably has strong nationalism. Now, a country is shaped by things it has gone through in the past. It's the same as a person's personality. The United States is a free country because it was created on the premise of gaining more freedom and becoming independent from Britain. A good argument is that pointing out flaws is a healthy thing, and it absolutely is. This is one thing I will agree on. In fact, pointing out flaws and taking action on these flaws has led to many modern-day changes in the United States. For example, in the 1913 suffrage parade, 5,000 women marched for equal political participation rights, and the peaceful protesters achieved this goal. Decades later, in 1955, Rosa Parks, after being discriminated against for where she sat down on a bus, started a series of protests in regard to segregation. A year later, in 1956, the Supreme Court ruled segregation on public buses unconstitutional. In 1963, a few years later, Martin Luther King led a 200,000-person march through Washington to bring attention to issues that African Americans still faced. A year later, this led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination and segregation. Now, when you look for it, the proof of change is abundant, when it's a true issue with social pressure. The new generations of activists, predominantly left-leaning, are fighting for global issues such as climate change and social issues like racism. But unlike the true activists which made a change, this new generation, who has enough issues in their own life, are suddenly able to tackle the problems that plague America. If you look at a statistic, this is insane. As of 2021, 50% of Generation Z that are over 18 still live with their parents. And they want to take on the problems of the world. Pseudo-activist is definitely a better term for many people in this new generation that are fighting for change. No real change is made because it's just something to make them feel better about themselves. Humans biologically seek affirmation and comfortability, so they sit and lather in ignorance and the falsehood of thinking they made a change. Now, in recent times, it's been normalized at such a level where if you don't outwardly support these progressive ideas that are pushed onto you, you're shamed for it. It's to such an extreme point where traditional values that we were founded upon and prospered from are being overthrown. The prosperous ideas that we once again were founded upon. And as of 2021, the United States has been a country for 245 years. Now, compared to other countries which have been around for thousands of years, this is a very small amount of time. And it truly is. But in these 245 years, we have progressed technologically, socially, economically, and we've provided equal opportunities for all. And most importantly, we have tried things that have failed. Failure allows room for improvement. But when we repeat the failures in an attempt for a different outcome, that is stupidity, that is ignorant. But history, which is well documented, and there's research on many things that can be done, it just seems that many progressives and activists hold ideas that at first glance would propel us forward, but with further thought and research, history has proven that these many ideas fail us. From Trickle-Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich by Thomas Sowell, this is a quote directly from his book. I quote, the facts are unmistakably plain for those who bother to check the facts. In 1921, when the tax rate on people making over $100,000 a year was 73%, the federal government collected a little over $700 million in income taxes, of which 30% was paid by those making over $100,000. By 1929, after a series of tax rate reductions, had cut the tax rate to 24% on those making over $100,000, the federal government collected more than $1 billion in income taxes, of which 65% was collected from those making over $100,000. In 1921, I'm gonna say this a little more easier. In 1921, the tax rate was 73%, and only 30% was paid by those making over $100,000. After the tax cuts, the rate was 24%, and 65% of the income was paid by those making over $100,000. And despite this large difference of tax rates, $300 million more was collected with a lowered tax rate. From one example of many, these new activists are rooting for higher taxes and other policies that have been proven to provide diminishing results. And this gives two conclusions. One is that both the activists and left-leaning lawmakers are ignorant to this fact and have not done adequate research to have a position on this topic, or that the activists are ignorant and the left-leaning lawmakers are reaping the benefits by promoting higher taxes. In my opinion, the latter is in effect right now, and it creates an easy path to be re-elected as a Democrat. Many of the new generation is coming fresh out of college, influenced by leftist teachers. They're severely in debt and they bolster useless degrees. They vote Democrat because their useless degree isn't finding them jobs, but they don't understand the implications of their vote. You need to think about it. How are Democrats going to get re-elected if they stop poverty when the majority of their base is lower income people? And moving on from that, the main attention in 2020 that activists took was a movement called BLM, Black Lives Matter, and you should know what that is, so explaining is not necessary. But activists took interest in this movement. Instead of focusing on real pressing issues in the black community, such as growing up without fathers, which is a leading cause for failure, ending the continuous cycle of welfare, or stopping black-on-black crimes, roughly 200 African Americans were killed by police in 2019, but more than 10,000 deaths happened from black-on-black murder. Instead of attempting to work towards solutions, these activists followed a movement that made no change in 7 months of protesting. Many followers of BLM voted for Biden, who supported BLM but promptly ignored the movement when she got elected. Who would have known? And as well as being shamed for not accepting progressive views, BLM was pushed on to people that saw past the equality and they saw into the supremacy that was being established. If you saw better solutions than pointless destructions, you're now a racist. Public lawmakers jumped on the bandwagon. Public lawmakers with national influence naming groups of people racist is not a good sign for unity. How can you push for equality as you continuously divide the nation? Opposition will always, but not exclusively, stem from a force that doesn't allow you to freely speak and think. And as well as naming people as racist, a particular lawmaker called to make a list of other people who supported Donald Trump in the 2020 election. It sounds ridiculous until you realize that actually happened, and she's still in office. Regression instead of progression is what's happening. I mean, from the age of when I was politically aware, it's terrifying to see how ignorant people are. People, when you're a young child, you think, oh, they're an adult, until you get older and you realize it doesn't mean anything. They're susceptible, they're gullible, everyone is, and it's to events that aren't broadcasted by the government. The government whom they hate so much, yet the same government who they want to control their lives. Proof of lies can be abundant and accessible if you just take some time, but yet the indoctrination, or whatever it is, just shines through that. Humans biologically seek affirmation and comfortability, and I say that again. So if you tell someone that a major component of their life is lying to them, they're never going to believe it until they want to. Even if you, or them, say it aloud and realize the sense it has, some people are too scared to believe it, or they're too far gone. Let's move on to the note of no real world knowledge. Some lawmakers on the left are attempting to ban rifles. And if it wasn't such a serious topic, their ignorance on the subject would just be comical. Half of crimes by guns are committed with illegal firearms, and on yearly averages, handguns are used 22 times more than rifles in homicides. The fear of rifles is perpetuated by the news channels that, albeit reasonably, report on mass shootings, and in which most are done by rifles. Although, I will say, if every drug overdose or opioid death was put on the news, everyone will work towards an immediate solution. It's reasonable to be on the news, but it's not every day, and it's only fear-mongering. Lawmakers just use it to their advantage. And when the huge majority of the country is middle or lower class, how can wealthy lawmakers relate to the struggles people face? Now, I propose no solution to this. I'm only offering a push towards thinking. One of the greatest things a man can do in his life is ask questions and ponder. So do it. It's all you need to do. But an argument towards more gun control doesn't lie in the numbers either. 2/3 of gun deaths happen from suicide. I mean, it's a sad and terrible statistic, but they choose, and in my eyes, they choose to suicide. They choose to end their life. So, if guns are banned, it's going to happen either way. But hypothetically, on a serious topic, if we ban guns and it miraculously works to stop suicides, are we going to ban belts, ropes, knives? It's an endless cycle. So why don't we work on something more simple, such as health, mental health? Why are we taking such a leap to ban guns? Now, when the country was founded, the Second Amendment was created. When guns were decided to be an amended right, the citizens had access to the same weaponry that a military may have had. And as of 2021, citizens are allowed to have semi-automatic rifles, which obviously could definitely put a dent or even stop an oppressive military. But the military possesses far more powerful weaponry and technology in a stronger grasp over the public. And with the political climate right now, it's far more than a better time to fight for, not against, our right to bear arms. Protection. Ignorance is the downfall of everything. Ignorance in someone who has influence over structure and others is an even greater risk. A butcher does not tell a pilot how to fly, and a dolphin does not tell a dog how to walk. The lines between professions are crossed in politics. A border that used to be strong, it's crossed, is non-existent anymore. We can use everything as proof that common sense is not common, as it used to be. Pseudo-activists and a pathetic lack of common sense. 2021 has been drastic, and it's honestly a great time to see through the lies and see through the things you were told, to do research and to not live in fear and ignorance. Learn and try to make a true change through understanding. Thank you for listening. These are just some thoughts on the political climate of today, on pseudo-activists, people who claim to be activists these days, and the lack of common sense. Thank you for listening.